Decoding the Visual Studio 2019 IDE, the matrix code to Igcse 0478. Look, let's just skip the small talk. If you're preparing for the Cambridge Igcse computer science exam, you already know the pressure is on. So today, in this explainer, we're decoding the exact examiner requirements. We're going to turn all that complex source material into a straightforward, no-nonsense blueprint for top marks. Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine a classic exam scenario. You're building a simple multiply machine. You've got your code working, the logic makes total sense in your head, but then, out of nowhere, the examiner dogs you massive points. We're talking losing a whole grade boundary here. Why? Because the student didn't grasp how the Integrated Development Environment, or IDE, handles variable scope and syntax in this specific exam context. You know, it's a painful, super common mistake, and it literally catches thousands of students off guard every single year.
But hey, here's the good news. Today, we are going to crack what I call the matrix code. We're decoding the precise framework that Cambridge examiners actually use to grade your answers. We're going to take that painful trap we just talked about and show you exactly how to flip it into a guaranteed top band mark. By the end of this explainer, you'll know exactly what the examiner is hunting for when they ask about programming environments.
Right, let's start with the absolute foundation. If the exam asks you to define an IDE, you absolutely cannot just write, "It's an app for coding." That gets you zero, zilch. You need the Cambridge safe definition. An integrated development environment is software that helps programmers to design, create, and test program code. Do you see those three verbs? Design, create, and test. Whatever you do, do not skip them. These specific verbs are exactly what the examiner's red pen is desperately looking for to award you those marks.
So, the specific IDE our source text focuses on is Visual Studio 2019 Community. And why this one? Well, because it's the free version of a full-blown commercial programming IDE. It's incredibly powerful. It supports multiple different programming languages and formats, which lets developers build for everything from web design to mobile apps to desktop computers. Essentially, it gives you a commercial-grade toolset entirely for free, making it the perfect sandbox for learning high-level programming. But here is the trick for the really focused learner. Despite the fact that Visual Studio can build almost anything you can imagine, our 0478 syllabus only requires us to focus on exactly two specific application types. Yep, just two. You don't need to master the whole shebang. You just need to understand these two specific environments to build up your computational thinking and, of course, satisfy those exam criteria. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference between those two types. First up, we have the console application, which runs on a command line interface. It's this uncluttered, purely textual interface. You type commands in, you get text back. Simple. Then, on the flip side, we have the Windows Forms application. This gives you a much richer visual experience based on a graphical user interface, or GUI. This one is way closer to the commercial systems you use every day, with the buttons, text boxes, and slick visual layouts. To really lock in these differences for your exam, let's just compare their interfaces directly. Look at the console app. The interface style is entirely textual and uncluttered. There are no graphics to slow you down. But for the Windows Forms app, the interface is highly visual and GUI-based. Now here's the thing. Both use very similar coding approaches to the algorithms underneath, but they differ entirely in how a user actually interacts with them. Grasping this distinction is absolutely fundamental to choosing the right tool for whatever scenario the exam throws at you. Now I want you to pay very, very close attention here. In just a few moments, I'm going to reveal a hidden examiner's clue about how you actually write your answers. It's this super specific requirement that completely transforms a pretty standard answer into a perfect one. Honestly, if you miss this upcoming framework, you are going to miss the ultimate key to full marks, even if your underlying code is technically flawless. So, keep this in the back of your mind as we keep moving. Okay, to unlock those marks, you absolutely need this high-stakes four-step framework. It's how you decode and conquer literally any Cambridge exam question. Step 1, identify the core concept being tested. Step 2, extract the evidence or the data directly from the scenario they gave you. Step 3, apply your scientific reasoning. Ask yourself, how does this concept apply to this specific data? And finally, step 4, output your answer using precise examiner wording. This structured approach, this is exactly how top-tier students think. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we apply that framework to a practical scenario. Let's say we're building a multiply machine in our IDE. We need to handle variables like number 1 for our input and multi to store our final multiplication result. If an exam question asks you to discuss these variables, how do you do it? Well, you can't just talk about variables in general terms. You have to handle them exactly the way the IDE, and more importantly, the examiner expects.
Before we solve that variable scope issue, there's a crucial syntax difference you've got to understand. When you're writing comments to explain your algorithm, the symbols actually change depending on the format. In pseudocode, you start your descriptions with the / symbol. But in Visual Basic within the IDE, comments start with a single quote mark, and the text usually turns green. Mixing these up, that is a classic matrix trap. So remember, if the exam asks for pseudocode, use the /. If it asks for program code, use the quote. Simple as that.
All right, let's escalate the stakes a bit. Should all variables be declared locally in this Windows Forms application? Pause for a second and just predict the answer in your head. Got it? Okay, if you just thought, yes, variables should be local to save memory, you are falling head first into a massive trap. That is a generic textbook answer, not an exam-winning answer. Remember that hidden examiner clue I warned you about just a minute ago? Well, here it is, straight from the examiner's red pen feedback. Generic answers lose marks. Always apply data types and scope directly to the scenario nouns. That right there is the secret. You cannot just talk about a variable. You absolutely must tie your reasoning directly to the specific nouns provided in the exam scenario to get those marks. Let's move to and see how this builds a perfect response. A flawed answer might say something like, the variable should be local and be a number. 0 marks. Why? Because it's too generic. But look at a top band answer. The variable multi should be declared with local scope within the multiplication subroutine and formatted as an integer data type to hold the resultant output of number 1 multiplied by number 2. Boom. Do you see that? We used the scenario nouns, multi, number 1, and we applied specific data types in scope. That is exactly how you secure top band marks. All right, let's lock this all in with a rapid revision checkpoint. 1. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Remember those 3 magic verbs: design, create, and test. 2. We contrast the purely textual console app with the visual Windows Forms app. 3. Always use the 4-step framework of concept, evidence, reasoning, and examiner wording. And 4, the golden rule: scenario nouns dictate how you describe your variable scope and data types. Keep these 4 things structured in your mind and you're golden. To make sure you never miss out on these exact examiner frameworks and top-tier strategies, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Ace the Exams, at acetheexams_Igcs to excel in your Cambridge examinations. We are constantly breaking down the source material into these really clear visual structures so you can study as efficiently as possible. We've completely decoded how to handle the IDE concepts and scenario nouns today. But I want to leave you with a rather provocative question. You know the matrix code for applying concepts now, right? But what happens to your answer structure when the examiner suddenly changes the command word at the start of the question from explain to evaluate? The entire game changes, and the wording you need flips completely. That's a deeper code we have to crack, and it's exactly what we're diving into in our next explainer. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.